Have you ever stopped for a moment and wondered why the kindest people you know often seem to carry the heaviest emotional weight? Why they are usually the ones who feel exhausted, overlooked, and quietly hurt, even though they never intend to feel that way. Because they give their time freely, they offer their energy generously, and they extend their understanding without keeping score. Yet, instead of feeling valued, they often feel taken for granted. And at some point in their life, they begin to ask themselves a question that feels uncomfortable and confusing at the same time, which is why being kind always seems to cost them more than it costs others. And the answer to this question has very little to do with bad luck, fate, or weakness, and everything to do with psychology and how the human brain responds to patterns of behavior. Because kind people usually see the world through intentions rather than outcomes. They believe that effort matters, empathy matters, and that treating people well will naturally encourage others to do the same. So they listen more than they speak, they forgive faster than they should, they avoid conflict even when something deeply hurts them, and they choose silence not because they agree, but because they value peace and harmony. And in their mind, kindness creates balance, stability, and emotional safety. But psychology teaches us something that often feels unfair, which is that human behavior does not respond to intentions. It responds to consistency, repetition, and patterns. And this is where the problem slowly begins, without the kind person even realizing it. Because patterns silently train the brain of others on what to expect. And at work, the kind employee stays late, accepts extra tasks, and avoids saying no because they do not want to appear difficult, uncooperative, or selfish. And at first, this effort may be noticed, appreciated, or even praised. But over time, that extra effort quietly becomes expected. And once something becomes expected, it loses its emotional value. And in relationships, the kind partner keeps understanding, keeps excusing behavior that hurts them, keeps believing patience will eventually change things. And they convince themselves that love means endurance and compromise. But slowly effort becomes one-sided, and emotional labor becomes invisible. And among friends, the kind person is always available, always listening, always helping, always responding quickly, until their presence becomes something people assume will always be there, rather than something they consciously value. And none of this happens suddenly or dramatically. It happens slowly, quietly, and subconsciously, because many kind people unknowingly develop what psychology calls people-pleasing behavior, which is not actually about kindness, but about emotional safety, as the brain learns early in life that approval equals acceptance, and acceptance feels safe. So it becomes highly sensitive to disappointment, rejection, and conflict, and it learns to avoid those feelings at all costs. And every time someone says yes instead of no, stays silent instead of speaking up, or places their own needs last instead of first, the brain rewards them with short-term relief. But over time, this creates a dangerous cycle where others subconsciously learn that this person's boundaries are flexible, negotiable, or sometimes completely invisible. And boundaries are not walls or acts of aggression. They are psychological signals that communicate how to treat you, what behavior is acceptable, and where respect begins. And the human brain naturally tests limits. Not because people are cruel or intentionally harmful, but because certainty feels safe. So when boundaries are unclear or absent, the brain continues to test how much it can take, how much it can ask for, how far it can push, and how much resistance actually exists. And silence is often interpreted not as kindness or maturity, but as permission, which leads to another uncomfortable truth from psychology that many people struggle to accept, which is that people do not respect kindness alone. They respect clarity, because niceness without direction creates uncertainty, and uncertainty makes the brain uncomfortable. And this is why calm, confident individuals are often respected more, even when they speak less, because they are predictable, consistent, and clear in their behavior. and the brain associates predictability with strength. Not loud strength or aggressive strength, but quiet, grounded strength. And this does not mean kind people need to become cold, rude, selfish, or emotionally distant. It means they need to protect their kindness instead of offering it without limits. Because kindness without boundaries slowly turns into self, and self-neglect always has a psychological cost. And protecting kindness begins with small but powerful shifts, such as pausing before agreeing instead of automatically saying yes. Because a pause signals self-worth and self-respect to both yourself and others. Expressing needs calmly rather than emotionally, because confidence does not need to over-explain itself. Learning to tolerate short-term discomfort instead of long-term resentment, and accepting a difficult but freeing truth that people who genuinely respect and value you will not leave because of boundaries, while only those who benefited from your silence will feel uncomfortable. And that discomfort is not your responsibility to manage, because boundaries do not destroy relationships, they reveal them. And kindness is not weakness, but unprotected kindness invites harm. And you do not lose your goodness by setting limits, you preserve it. And once you truly understand how people think, react, and behave, you stop blaming yourself for being kind and start choosing yourself without guilt, fear, or shame. And when you choose yourself, you do not become less compassionate. You become healthier, more balanced, and more emotionally grounded. And if you want to continue understanding human behavior, psychology, and the hidden mental patterns that shape everyday life, so you can stay kind without being taken advantage of, subscribe to Brain and Behavior, because awareness does not just change the way you think, it changes the way you live, the way you relate to others, and the way you protect your own mind.